We're going to go into the 4 key components that every single athlete needs if they want to develop speed, and we're going to start right now. When I've coached at the Olympics, where I'm about to leave to go to my 2nd straight Olympics as a coach, and when I've coached at nearly a dozen world championships, and when I've helped different athletes get to that Power 5 Division 1 level, become All-Americans, become state champions, a lot of different improvements come back to understanding how we can develop a proper speed system. Okay, and so some of the big aspects that we're about to go into in our second part of this video series is to break down what those key aspects are, and even to provide a little nugget for all of you guys out there that might not have access to a lot of crazy training resources. So when we're training for speed, the first thing that we have to do is identify key areas, okay? And if we can identify those key areas, then we can look at specific sports and we can understand what sports might use more areas that are related to, let's just say that first key area is acceleration. Let's just say that second key area is change of direction. And then that third key area is going to be max velocity, or that top end speed. And then we can look at, okay, what are the sports that use more acceleration, or that use more change of direction, or that use more max velocity? And then finally, another big concept here for you athletes is understanding that there's some instances where training at max velocity will actually have a huge impact on acceleration, and a little bit vice versa, but not as much. So if we can understand that concept and that theory, it makes it easier to build out the system that you guys need to be working towards. This is the second part of this video series. The first part of the video series, we went into that ultimate workout split, and that ultimate workout split included training for speed. It included training for endurance, explosiveness, and absolute strength. Now, in this specific example, we're going to be looking at those key components behind speed. So if we're building a speed program that is just built for sprinters, we're going to look at basically 2 aspects, okay? And then we'll backdoor everything with the third aspect. Now, if we're training athletes, we're going to try and figure out what the problem areas are for specific athletes and really build them out. Okay, so if we have an individual, let's say theoretically we're working with a basketball player here and a football player here, or maybe even a soccer player here and an offensive lineman here. The first thing that we need to do when we're looking at the speed components is understand those speed tests. Okay, so if we're looking at training someone and understanding what their 40 is, knowing what their 20-yard shuttle is, knowing what their flying 10 might be. When we see those test results, now we can look at how the athlete moves. What's their change of direction like? What's their 40 time like, which is going to give us a better peek into their top speed, or how well they accelerate and their top speed. And then when we look at something even like that flying 10, we can see if it's later on in a run, let's say it's between 40 and 50 yards, we can see typically around where their top end speed is going to be. Okay, so that's going to help us then build out that system. If we have someone who is a little slower out of the gate, okay, it takes them a while to get moving. The first thing that I'm going to do is going to be target that first aspect. Okay, so that first day is going to be, as you can see here, focus on acceleration work. So that might look like we've got that football player who's slow off the line. Okay, we've got a soccer player who maybe can run really well from like 20 to 30 yards with the ball in their feet, right? Where they're actually controlling it. But to get them moving to go make a play, they're a little slow. It takes them a little while to get their feet rolling. Okay, it's almost like I always like to think about the road runner just standing in place, just spinning their tires, spinning their wheels, and then getting moving. What we want to see is somebody put force into the ground and get rolling. So that first key aspect is going to be developing acceleration. Typically what we see is that those athletes that accelerate very, very well are going to be the best athletes on the field if their skill is equivalent. If we can understand that all of the speed work that we are doing is supplemental to the sport skill. Okay, so we need our athletes to be able to train their sport skill as well as possible. So playing basketball, playing soccer, playing football, throwing, they need to be as good as possible and partake in those specific skills sports. So the supplemental work that we need to do is to develop them as athletes so that when they execute those skills, they can do it at higher speeds with more precision. Okay, so we need to make sure that our training is not having a negative impact on their sports skill development. So going back to this, if we can identify that the athlete who's a little slower off the line, or who maybe is a little bit slower with making those game time decisions and getting moving to that ball, now we see, let's focus more on acceleration work. That first big training tip is that you guys need to develop acceleration, okay? The second big component here is that when we look at sports like the high jump, when we look at a sport like hurdles, when we look at a sport like basketball, lacrosse, wrestling, now we're seeing a second component of speed. The second component of speed is going to be change of direction. Now you see here on the program builder that we have day 2 change of direction. This doesn't necessarily mean that the entire workout is just change of direction based, because there is some evidence that doing max velocity can improve change of direction. It can improve acceleration. So in the case of change of direction, we need to see how well an individual can slam on the brakes. Then we need to see how well they can slam on the brakes and get out of that position. You know, think of a running back like Barry Sanders planting and cutting. Think about Ronaldo planting and jumping as high as possible for his super jump. Think about Michael Jordan, LeBron James planting, cutting back, jumping to take a shot. Those are examples of change of direction. So we need to be able to diagnose with the athlete, are they stable in a unilateral position? Are they stable bilaterally? What's their trunk control like when they're moving through these positions? Speed-based training has to involve these concepts, and they have to involve these assessments. That's a key component behind our brand new update in Peak Strength. In Peak Strength 2.0, we've put in assessment weeks. We've put in specific tests to inform us on what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are. And then the system is built around those weaknesses and those strengths to enable you as an athlete to really blossom and become an absolute freak. So if you guys want to get into speed-based programming, speed-based training, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store, and you can start training for speed specific to your sport. Now, the third component around speed work, this is where we're going to see that max velocity work. This is sort of like that hidden gem. And the interesting part here is that I think because of the sports specific ideology of just doing everything that directly mimics the sport, we've gotten lost a little bit from carryover, from transfer of training. A good example would be a back squat doesn't resemble a clean, but there's evidence to say that if a back squat increases, the clean will increase. This is the comparison with max velocity. There's a large amount of evidence, specifically from Ken Clark, who's a speed master, a speed researcher at Westchester University here in Pennsylvania. And Ken Clark has shown that if we train max velocity, okay, let's say 60, 80, 100 meter sprints, there's a carryover to increasing acceleration. Okay, so in this example, if we train a 60 or an 80 for, let's say, 4 or 5 reps, now we're actually going to see in our acceleration, our rate of acceleration will increase. The dial will turn up. So if we can understand that someone has a lower max velocity, they don't run as fast at top end speed, and we practice the skill of running at top end speed, now what's interesting is it's also going to carry over to their acceleration. So inside of a speed training program, it's important that we still do that. Even as a running back, where most of your runs may only be 5 to 10 to 15 total yards, running 40s, running 60s, running 80s at top speed with the sole purpose, the sole goal of increasing that max velocity will still carry over to acceleration. And they arguably will still carry over to that change of direction as long as the athlete is strong and can uphold the structural integrity to make those cuts. So those are those 3 specific areas around speed-based programming. Understanding that and bringing that into a comprehensive, cohesive system. And again, that's what we've done inside of Peak Strength. The brand new update involves speed-based training that's going to help you guys become a freak. Now, one more key aspect around speed-based training. I like to think through those 3 specific areas, but I also like to bring in almost like a totally different realm. One of those hacks that you can use if you're trying to increase your bench press is just increase your volume. One of those things that's relative to the speed world is to just get on a hill. And oftentimes when we're constantly assessing, we're constantly measuring, we're constantly going through these tests, sometimes we forget that some of the easiest ways to increase something like acceleration, top end speed, change of direction might just be doing more resisted work, or in the case of the hill, getting on a proper hill and running as well as possible in a well-organized workout, in a well-organized warm-up, and then executing that as well as you possibly can with the best technique possible. So part 3 of this video series is we're actually going to get out to a hill. I'm going to take athletes through a specific hill session. We're going to show you guys what you can do on the hill and how you can apply that into your training using peak strength. And in this case here, when we get to the hill, we have to identify what part of this workout is going to be acceleration based. What part of this workout is just a good warm up to get the body flowing, to get the blood flowing as well as possible. And then what part of this workout is going to be more targeted towards that top end speed. And then that's how we build out those rest periods. And then that's how we can execute a really, really high quality workout to increase your speed as an athlete. Now, these are all things that are happening inside of our brand new update in Peak Strength. So head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download Peak Strength today. Make sure you're selecting the sport that you are specifically training for, because you're going to get speed workouts and lifting workouts and explosive workouts and even some endurance components to help increase your performance as an athlete. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.